Hi everyone, we're happy you could join us for today's session, Quest for a Flawless UI UX, Trends, Threats, Challenges, and Test Automation Tools, with guest speakers Diego Lo Giudice, VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, and joining him is Gil Tayar, Senior Architect and Evangelist at Applitools. Before we dive in, I'd like to say a few words about our distinguished speakers. In addition to his expertise in application development, Diego has over 28 years of industry experience. So when C-level management at top-tier companies wants to optimize app delivery processes or receive top-notch analysis of internal technology management strategies, they turn to Diego for his expert advice and in-depth knowledge of the industry, tools, and best practices. We are very happy he agreed to join us for this webcast. Our second speaker is Gil Tayar. He also has over 30 years of experience in software development, and prior to joining Applitools, he has co-founded several startups and worked at the world-renowned cloud-based web development platform, Wix.com. Gil has extensive experience with test automation and software testing, and his in-depth tech savvy is second to none when it comes to tools of the trade and best practices, and this is why he is regularly invited to speak at leading global dev test conferences. So now, without any further ado, Diego, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Thank you, Adi, for the introduction, the great introduction, and I'm also very delighted to be on the call today. I guess, as you mentioned, I do write a lot of research around testing and intersect that with some of the leading trends, Agile, DevOps, but recently also with some of the newest, like artificial intelligence, and so anyway, I'm gonna try and share everything I've learned so far in some of these areas specifically. So let's dive into the conversation here. So the first thing is that everybody, hears about digital, and I usually, and probably everybody sees a lot of these examples that we, cool examples that we share and show about digital. This time I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to go skip that stage, thinking that everybody knows what nice, cool digital apps and digital experiences are. But I do want to talk about a few things in the digital space. And the first thing is that, why is it that digital leaders or companies that are leading in this digital space are, as we call them in Forrester, obsessed about customer experience? Well, we actually do quite a bit of in-depth studies in these areas. One thing that we do in Forrester is we have created what we call the Customer Experience Index. And what we do there, we're tracking industries across the world, across different industries in the world, companies in each geography. And we build this online index, customer experience index, that is based on some drivers around customer experience as we define it in Forrester. And what we've noticed is that those, customer experience index that we assign to companies and to markets, we've seen data shows us that 1 point improvement on the customer experience index has an impact, a positive impact, on the revenue, on the annual incremental revenue. And you can see here the annual incremental revenue per customer for the different industries that we calculated in the 2016-17 data. An example: auto manufacturers mass market, $48 annual incremental revenue per customer for an average. If they have more or less 18 million customers, it's a huge number of around 873 million. So where am I trying to go with this? Well, I guess it is about revenue, right? It's about customer experience improvement increases revenue. That's the whole point, right? That's why everybody is focusing on customer experience, because it helps get new customers on board, it helps keep the current customers happy, and it helps basically improve the revenue that everybody wants to do in business today. Now, another important aspect of customer experience is, of course, right, user experience. And I would say that you know, what is the best thing? What is the most important thing that creates customer experience? It is the software that we build, it really is what makes a difference is what customers see when they use the applications and the services based on those applications, the apps and all the software that they use. It's largely and strongly influenced by what they see. Of course, it has to be performant, it has to be secure, it has to have all those great entities that we all talk about, right? Reliability and be easily accessible. The data has to be right. It has to automate the right touch points. But a large influencer is what people see, is what we use, right? When we're using something, how it exposes itself. But it's also, even that experience is changing, and as artificial intelligence gets more implementations in the market, and actually it's amazing how the 2017 data shows us that more than 50% of the organizations have implemented and are implementing AI projects, with another 20% planning it. It's a 10% increase compared to 2016. So what are they doing? You know, they're building these chatbots, AI-fueled chatbots that can basically enable us to read things in a natural way, or to actually instrument voice, have voice, and therefore have an experience that is based more on a human type of experience, that is hearing, speaking, seeing, and reading, right? So the customer experience is even changing further. So and becoming more sophisticated, let's say, and different from what we used to do. But that's coming, right? That's not there yet. So given this challenge, I guess the question is the question about how do we build this customer experience, right? From a development perspective, from an IT perspective, from a technology management perspective, we have the challenge of creating great customer experience. So leading organizations in Forrester, we call leading organizations in the customer that are obsessed about customer experience, we call customer obsessed organizations. And what is their DNA? Well, they're not just customer aware, right? That's kind of the easy part. Everybody can say customer is at the center of my strategy. But the question is, can you go beyond simply knowing what the customer, who the customer is, and knowing more about his behavior, what he's going to do next? Can you co-plan with them? This is what Lego, by the way, does with their customers, right? And so they become customer-led, right? They also go from data-rich to insights-driven. What does that mean? Everyone has lots of data, more data that we can deal with. You know, we realize that in our studies that enterprises leverage no more than 30 to 40% in the positive case of the data that they have at the enterprise level. So the point is not just getting more data. Actually, that is a requirement going forward for, especially with AI coming, as I mentioned. But it's more about really being able to get out of that data insight to action. And so getting into the hands of the employees and of customers data so that they can share and use it, and you can share it, your own data, with your partners, for example. And Domino's, you know, the pizza company, they do something similar. They share the data that they have into their franchise owners, so that they that when they were invoking some changes, the franchisees could go with them very quickly, and everyone is on board. So it speeds up the delivery. The next thing that customer-obsessed organizations do is they go from perfect to fast. Yet few leaders really deliberately exploit, you know, the action-taking opportunities. Instead, what they do, and we've done a lot of this in the past, is we get lost in the bureaucracy. They get lost in bureaucracy and the preference for developing bulletproof solutions, the analysis paralysis, design to death, until, you know, we are able to build something and deliver it. It takes really a lot of time. So the question is, how do they? What customer-obsessed organizations do is they go from, and companies like Coca-Cola do this. They instead have a bias for action to quickly test. They want to test ideas very quickly. They want to test those ideas, get feedback, and go and move on in implementing, the next new feature. And last but not least is they go from siloed to connected. And this is more about networking at the organizational level. Getting really good at cross-functional teams, connecting, for example, CIOs with marketing. Marketing used to be a department that CIOs didn't even serve in the past, and now they do today. So really, when you look at that, this is what a customer-obsessed organization does. So what you could do is you could give yourself a vote from 1 to 5 on each one of these and see where you are lacking. Where you're closer to a 0 and where you're closer to a 5. What I find is that perfect and fast is the area where everybody struggles more with. So everybody wants more speed, right? We all know that. Everybody talks about faster delivery, speed and delivery. But really, another thing that I find is in the testing coverage is that that speed cannot come without quality. And that's why I've been writing in the last 5 years about quality at speed. And the metaphor I like to use is this of the Formula One, where these guys turned a quality problem of a pit stop. It was kind of a problem. Pit stops were a problem because it would, during the pit stop, everything stops, and you're wasting seconds to win the race, to get to the last minute, getting at the final arrival. And so what they've done is they've actually resolved and made the pit stop something that is now strategic to winning the race. They have gone from taking more or less 10 seconds to change 4 wheels down to 2.1 seconds. I think in the last race last week, that not necessarily the Ferraris of the world and the Mercedes of the world and the Red Bulls. I mean, I just have here Ferraris because I'm Italian and I like red, and I like, of course, I'm a fan of Ferrari. But the point is that what these guys have done in Formula One is they've turned quality into something that is a key aspect for winning races, for being faster. And so they're building quality in from the very beginning. That's kind of the metaphor we need to do in the software world, where quality is usually an afterthought, and quality is something that is in between gaining, testing and gaining higher, better functional, better technical quality, and deciding if I want to be late, because it usually comes down the road at the end, and when we're kind of late for the release schedule. So it really does get into the way. So today, and I mentioned this already, is what is it that actually organizations are using to build what I call modern application delivery organizations, or organizations that are capable of building better software faster. Well, I think 2 of the best things happening in the market are Agile and DevOps. And it's not just Agile or just DevOps, but it is, as you see and read it here, Agile plus DevOps. There's no reason to do one without the other, and actually doing one, you can't do one without the other to a certain extent. In other words, you do need to be Agile to better leverage DevOps, but on the other hand, if you don't have DevOps they're bringing the principles of more automation, of tearing down the wall between development and production, and all you're doing is tearing down the wall between business and development. With Agile, you have another wall to hit, which is the operations wall, right? So we have to throw all those walls down and create these delivery pipeline that allows me to go pretty fast across the ideation, planning, build, test, release, monitor, and also use that last, the feedback loop that DevOps encourages and implements through the monitoring. Therefore, using insights and data analytics by understanding what people think about apps into production, what data I might be getting through the monitoring in production, and that will tell me, give me some great information in the left, earlier in the cycle, at the to developers, what can I do to improve, you know, to make sure that what I'm delivering in production is of great experience. And as you can see here, testing is right at the heart of this. So I could, you know, spend hours here talking about Agile and DevOps, and actually I'm going to be releasing some real interesting updates on Agile plus DevOps soon with data. You know, I would say the industry is moving towards both of these things. More than 50% of the developers would say that they're, you know, they've adopted Agile, maybe even close to 60%. DevOps is kind of a little bit behind, but growing fast. But doing them both end to end, that's where the number goes down to 20%. So we still have a lot to do to really be able to implement this continuous delivery pipeline to build better software faster. And so, as I mentioned, testing is at the heart of this, and it's kind of, if you think about, you know, testing itself, there's quite a few challenges here that we are facing as testers. One, we need to build great customer experience, but that is also, of course, tied to, we have to build greater quality, both functionally and technically. We cannot allow bugs to go into production, which, if software is becoming more strategic to the company, of course, bugs in production will be a bigger problem. They will hit the news. They will actually stop revenue from flowing in, because, as we saw, software improves customer experience, which improves revenue. And so there's a huge responsibility that that testers have these days, I would say, right? It all has to happen at great speed. It has to be great quality. It has to be great customer experience. Now, don't be discouraged if you are a tester, because we have been making great changes in the way, you know, we work as testers, and in the tools, and so you know, in this world of continuous delivery, where in a push of a button we are promoting code from one stage to the next, and where we have this concept of delivery pipelines, where work is flowing continuously from ideation, planning, to build, to continuous integration, to deploying and automating the release and getting feedback from production. If that's the kind of automation and the aspiration that we have, testing cannot but be done. It has to be done continuously as well. So that's why I talk about continuous testing a lot in my research recently, because it's the way to actually, it really is the way to actually be able to build quality at speed. And so continuous testing really, you know, means basically a lot of automation. It means, as you will see, shifting testing to the left. It means converging performance and functional testing. It means diminishing as much as possible all sorts and types of manual testing. So in the continuous, this is a little bit more technical view of that you know, continuous integration, continuous delivery journey that organizations go through. So what are, you know, all the steps and the different tools, as you can see, that are the chain of tools that are needed to be able to work in this new way, where customers and customer experience and new ideas are being quickly taken into consideration. Backlogs of these are built. Code is written. It gets committed and checked in, integrated into a CI server. Unit tests get kicked off. Static code analysis gets done. Peer code review. Integration gets also automated. More than just some user interface testing is done. API automation, because we need to also do functional testing that goes beyond the user interface. Release decisions are made in an automated fashion with these servers, and releases get automated and deployed into production. So, and basically the requirements on automating this loop, you know, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be like the unicorns of the world, like the Netflixes or the Amazon that, you know, claims, and they actually do, deliver new features into production every 11.6 seconds. And, you know, you don't necessarily need to get there, but you definitely are trying to. The data shows us that more than 50% of the organizations these days are trying and are delivering software into production, releases into production every month or sooner, and that is a big improvement compared to what we used to do. And so the question is, how can we eliminate, from a testing perspective, more of the manual that remains? So while automation is needed for functional tests, for performance tests, for unit tests, there's still manual testing that needs to be done. And so, you know, UAT is an example, user acceptance testing, but visual testing, of course, comes in here, is the context for what I'm going to be talking about. So here, if we're looping fast and we're trying to deliver software fast into production, we still need our users to test, to take a quick look at what's being delivered, right? And usually that's done manually because we have no choice. So let me talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, because I also kicked off a research last year on this, and what I wanted to find out is can AI help? Can artificial intelligence help increase the level of automation? Can artificial intelligence help us actually improve the way we build software, more generally speaking? And there was a heat map into that research, and as you can see in this slide, the heat map shows that testing was the hottest area for where AI can be applied. That's what the companies that are researching and building products and services around testing, you know, came back, the data that came back with. So what is it that can be done? Well, we can analyze better technical code with machine learning. Machine learning is one of, by the way, one of the biggest approaches used for analyzing data these days. But and this might be even more traditional, but it's also the use of predictive machine learning, where we want to also predict what type of bugs might be coming depending on how I've done things at a certain point. Being able to predict outcomes of future, you know, of future tests that through these machine learning algorithms that can predict some of that, increase test coverage and decrease business risk, but even being more precise on images and user interface. So there's a whole area, and I'm kicking off a new research in in January 2018 on going deeper in how can AI help and what type of use of AI technologies, for which bits of testing can AI be used. And so the answer is, can artificial intelligence help? Well, it looks like it can, and actually it can, as we will see in a minute. And there's one specific technology that I think is really becoming more and more at the center stage, is neural networks or deep learning, right? So here's the difference where AI is going is, instead of programming and telling an algorithm what to do exactly step by step, we teach the algorithm to learn. So it's learning about, it's gonna be enabled to learn about certain patterns, certain things that we want it to learn about, and that's very powerful. It's early days, although there's lots of progress in a couple of areas, as I mentioned, like visual and image analysis, and but also voice recognition. And things are moving quite fast, right? So if you look at this picture, it's quite confusing even for a human being looking at this quickly to find out where muffins, you know, where we have a muffin, where we have a chihuahua. Actually, this was an experiment where now artificial intelligence neural networks were used. And to make the system work much better, what happened was they built actually a cascade, a couple of neural networks, one that would teach the next neural network, calling the teacher neural network a GAN, a generative adversarial neural network, that basically created images and created tough images for the neural network that was supposed to recognize chihuahuas to try and confuse it. It's a little bit like, you know, a teacher that gives you a hard test, and therefore stressing the neural network to learn and become more precise. So all this is improving. Neural networks still make mistakes, but I tell you, the results are so that we can start using this technology. And actually, you're seeing it used, right? It's being used in self-driving cars. It's being used in neural networks in cybersecurity, being used in image recognition. If you have, Siri uses it for voice. I mean, it's being used quite frequently. So where does that leave us? Well, that's also, and actually I know Applitools has been doing this now for quite some time, but it really, what we're seeing is there is this emerging discipline that we call visual testing, right? Where you have to kind of think about it as how does a human being test a user interface, user experience? Who's the best today that can do that? Well, I think, and I would say a human, right, with his vision, has the best capabilities for recognizing images, videos, and text, for capturing even very difficult differences. But the question is, when we start doing that across a number of different devices, many browsers, and you have to scale that human being to be fast in that continuous delivery, that's very hard. And a human being is challenged. We can't actually do it. There will be differences that, because we need to look at them very quickly, that the human eye won't catch. Even if we're looking about, like, IoT, Internet of Things, where you've got mechanical things moving fast, those images, that type of capture will be really hard for our own eyes. And so what visual testing does, it does a couple of things. First, it supports us humans in doing a better job in deciding what's really right and what's really wrong in user interfaces. But it also enables a level of automation testing that we weren't capable of doing before, and because it automates the validation of UI, the consistency. When I was giving you that example of doing this over and over, and over and over on different devices, on different browsers, and different versions of operating systems in a continuous delivery environment, that's going to be really hard. And the only way to cut down that manual testing but still have the great experience tested is it's going to be possible only through visual testing. And so in other words, this is I think it's a great opportunity for including customer experience testing, user experience testing in that continuous delivery pipeline that I was talking about. But actually, as I'm sure Gil will show you in the next presentation, because that's the great thing, I just talk a high level about this, but you're going to see how it actually works in a minute. It also is visual testing is a great tool also for front-end developers during development phase without necessarily testing. So you can monitor, what's the changes that might be happening at your user, that you have to do at your user interface, and therefore even it helps testing shift left even further, and it helps shift this manual testing, this user acceptance testing further. So basically, at the end of the day, it's a great platform for, one, supporting front-end developers to speed up the changes they need to do into the UIs, as you will see in a minute, but it also automates the manual testing, and it augments testers with capabilities to create a baseline of what they want to accept in terms of changes, what they think is consistent, what might not be consistent, and then replicate that automatically across many platforms. And with that, I thank you very much, and I will pass it back to Gil. Gil, are you on mute?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, it's all yours. Go for it.
Thank you, Diego. I'd like to continue what Diego was talking about, the importance of doing quality at speed, which is vitally important today. I'd like to zoom out a bit, talking about agility, and then zoom in back into testing. So everybody wants, to do agility. That's easy. And funnily enough, Diego and I both chose a car analogy to talk about agility. For me, it was the old way of doing a perfect design, a perfect product, 6 months of development, and then creating something that should be perfect but probably isn't, versus the new Agile method where you do very small incremental changes little by little, just like in a factory, just like Henry Ford did with factories. So for me, that is the importance of Agile, the most important thing in Agile, which is very, very small incremental changes. Unfortunately, lots of changes means lots of problems. If you do lots and lots and lots of changes, you'll get lots of bugs, lots of conflicts between people, between different teams, etc., etc. How can we help that? And the answer is we minimize friction. We minimize friction during each step of that change, where the change is going from development to production. And how do we do that? Diego said it. It's basically DevOps. We build a pipeline where each step of the pipeline should be and is very, very simple to use. So coding should be simple. Moving back to a build system, moving the code to a build system is simple. Testing the code should be simple. Deploying it and monitoring it. Diego even added the BI feedback loop, where you get the business intelligence and that feeds back into product requirements and coding. That should also be simple. So basically what we want to do is create a CI, continuous integration, and CD pipeline where every step of the way is simple. But this is the usual way people tend to think of a DevOps pipeline, although I've seen hundreds of pictures. This is, we can abstract it down to this. I tend to think of it more like this, because in an Agile world, it's not one person doing code, build, test, deploy. It's lots of teams in parallel doing code, build, test, deploy, production. You can't ask people. It's not really a pipeline where everybody is coding and then everybody's building, then everybody's testing, because then we go back to the waterfall method. It's actually lots and lots of teams, everybody committing small increments of code which go through that pipeline. Obviously, not everybody deploys every commit, but I've seen companies that do that. But definitely deploying every time management wants it is a goal that we should encourage. How do we do that? And the answer for me is here. An agile pipeline cannot, well, agility can never be accomplished without good testing. Good testing is a necessary attribute of any agile pipeline, any DevOps pipeline. Without that, you will never be able to rush things into production. And I'm not just talking about manual testing, what I tend to call throwing the code over the wall to QA, but rather testing as part of the pipeline. Each commit that the developer does, or each bunch of commits the developer does, is getting built, getting tested through automated testing, and if those tests pass, deployed to production. So I want to zoom in on that test and talk about the different types of testing. Now, put 10 developers in a room, 100 developers in a room, you'll probably get 100 views on what types of testing you have. And do that again a day after, you'll probably get another 100 different types of views with the same developers. So please, apologies if the types of testing I use here are not the ones you're used to. I've literally heard of hundreds of categories of testing. So unit is when you test one unit of code. Component is very similar to unit. I usually tend to use it when we're talking about a visual component. Integration is testing a set of components or units. End-to-end test and functional are testing the application as the user tends to use it, and not as little bits of code that can be integrated together. Functional is testing a separate, a smaller subset of the code, and end-to-end is obviously just installing the whole product somewhere and testing it end to end. I'll skip acceptance and production monitoring. Diego said we also need to verify that in production that the code is working as expected. How do we improve quality? So we have all these kinds of testing, and we understand that we need to improve the quality. How do we improve that quality while still going at speed? And for me, let's look at a subset of these types, because this is what we're talking about in this, because different types of testing have different strategies for improvement. I'd like to talk about this subset in green: component, functional, end-to-end, and production monitoring. What is the similarity between these four? Well, very simple. They all have a visual aspect to them. A component, when you're testing a component, a visual component, obviously they have a visual aspect. Functional and end-to-end test the product as the user would test it, and the user usually sees the product, so they have a visual aspect to them. And production monitoring, while usually has been delegated to testing whether the service is up. We've all seen cases, at least in the news, if not online, where hackers hack into a site, deface it with all kinds of slogans, and it takes a while for the service to figure out the site has been hacked. So the production monitoring also has a visual aspect to it. Steve Jobs quote, a webinar, a talk without a Steve Jobs quote is something we should never do. So design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. And I would like to inverse it. Design is also how it looks like, not just how it works, not just how it feels like. And unfortunately, we've been mostly ignoring this type of testing until now. It's been delegated to, let me say, a casual look of the manual tester while they do some functional tests, while they do some end-to-end tests. You know, as you go along and test the functionality of the code, please, can you just, look and see if it looks right for you? And if the tester is good, the manual tester is good, they spot the bug. But usually those bugs it skips their eyes. Sometimes the bug is glaringly obvious, sometimes it's subtle. And even the obvious things, people tend to miss them because they're doing something else. For example, in this case, it's an artificial case, I don't think it ever happened. If the Google logo moved from shifted right a couple of pixels, who would see that it's correct? Well, if you put them one after the other, like in this slide, well, yeah, obviously it's very easy to spot. But a person that is a tester that is just, clicking and checking that the functionality of Gmail is working, what chance have they to spot that the logo has shifted slightly to the right? There's a famous experiment, which I'm not going to run because I'm not sure it will work in the webinar, but you have the link down below and you will get links to the presentation. There's a famous experiment where somebody asks people to check how many times a ball is passed between the white people in the video, and well, you should see the video and figure out how most manual testers will skip, even will fail to find even the obvious mistakes. Try it, it's really fun. So without automated visual testing, quality suffers. That's obvious. And enhancing it is an area that is crucial, as Diego said. It's bottom line. Enhance your customer experience, enhance your visuals, you get bottom line results. So, okay, so now I need to do visual testing besides the regular functional end-to-end, blah, 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 blah. That's just more work. So how come you're talking about quality at speed? You're just making us do more work, which means less speed. So how can visual testing be quality at speed? Let's go back and look at those types of testing that have a visual component. In all these tests, the tests check the functionality of the application. Let's try and figure out how that works. Let's look at, a test as it is written in English. All these tests have usually two kinds of things, two steps. The first step is do something. Open a browser, navigate to the page, click, change form please, click, 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 until you get to something, and then you validate the result. Expect that this checkbox has this value, expect this field to have that value, etc., 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 etc. All tests look like that. Do something, validate result. Do something, validate result. Unfortunately, the validate result is hard. It's hard to write code that validates the result, especially across hundreds of tests. And moreover, it's fragile. Figuring out the selectors, where you have to figure out where the field is, how to reach it in the page. It's called selectors. Figuring out the selectors is time-consuming work. Moreover, as the developers change the code, those selectors change and your tests fail. Fields move all the time. Extracting the value is work. Checkbox turns into 2 radio buttons, turns into a combo box, etc., etc. And the functionality changes, moves from page to page sometimes. This whole validation is time-consuming and fragile. But what if we could do something holistic? What if we can check the whole thing in one try? What if we can remove all these expect this to have that, expect this to have that validation results, validation checks, and check everything on the page at one time? Can we do that? And the answer is yes. Visual testing enables you to check the whole page. Take a screenshot of the whole page, check the whole page in one validation. So the whole validation means goes through visual testing. You do your functional tests as you would have. You won't change them. You don't have to add a visual test. You do your functional tests as you would have, but instead of all those expect validations, you just do one single validation of the whole page. So visual testing is the answer, I believe, to the types of tests that have a visual aspect to it. Obviously, they're not useful for unit testing, which has no visual aspect, or integration testing, which has no visual aspect. But they are very useful for the other types of testing. Well, the big question, if it's so great, why hasn't it been tried before? And the answer is, it's not only been tried before, it's being tried as we speak. There are lots and lots of tools. This is really a small selection of them. Needle, Gemini, every language, every framework has their own set. A lot of people have been convinced that visual testing is a way to test your quality, do quality tests at speed, test the visual aspects of your software while also enhancing the speed. Obviously, Applitools Eyes, our product, is also part of that. How do all of these work? Well, they all work in the same way. You send us screenshots. When I say you, I mean the test. You send the service or the testing framework a screenshot of your app. You decide when to send the screenshot. The screenshot is compared against a baseline image, what should be the screenshot. Any difference found is reported to the developer. If no difference, the test passes. If there is a difference, it is reported, and the user rejects or accepts the difference. This is basically how all these tools work. Let's talk about each step. First, let's talk about sending the screenshot. I'll give an example using Applitools Eyes, but it's very, very similar in all the others. This is JavaScript code. So line 23, you can see driver.get, which is browsing, navigating to this page. And then checking the window. Checking the window means taking a screenshot and validating it against a baseline. Then we click on the button here, and we do a check to ensure that the home page after clicking is what it should be. This is all we need to do. Instead of expect clauses, we just do one check window after every action we want to test. So this is the addition. It's actually replacing to functional tests. You could, and lots of companies decide to do visual testing as a separate process, but you could integrate them into your functional tests. What about comparing the screenshots with baseline images? This is important because, unfortunately, one does not simply do bitmap comparison. Just checking the pixels of the two, the baseline image and the actual image, doesn't work. And why? Well, you'll get many false positives. Things that look identical to the human eye, but aren't identical from a pixel perspective. And why? I'll give you a screenshot of one part of a screen that was shot on one computer, and the same screen, the exact same screen, given which was taken with another computer. As you noticed, as you can see, it's not the same pixels. Why? Different browsers, different versions of the browsers, different GPUs, different operating systems. There are tons of things that can affect the screenshot. So pixel by pixel comparison does not work. One needs to do some kind of fuzzy factor. Besides these problems, lots more problems, I don't want to get into them, but an important thing is performance. Taking those screenshots and checking them is somewhat time consuming, and we need to do that fast. As I said, most tools, what they do is they give you a fuzz factor. Please tell me how much you want when comparing the two. What is the error ratio? 5%, 7%, 10%? If it's 5%, fine, we'll pass it. If it's 10%, we won't. Unfortunately, testers tend to up the bar all the time until it reaches heights like 20%, where you get things that are bugs being passed because of the high error ratio. That's problematic, and the answer to that, I believe Diego said that, is to look at the image as humans would. A human, when they see those two images, it's glaringly obvious what is the real difference and what is not. And if you're looking at a tool for visual testing, look for tools that look at the image as a human would and not as a computer algorithm would. You look at tools that have complex algorithms and AI in them that enable them to compare these images in a meaningful way, and you don't need to fine-tune the fuzz factor when you're comparing the images. So, reporting images, reporting the differences. This is important because a lot of times those tests will pass because nothing has changed, but a lot of times a difference is found, and a difference can be found because of two reasons. One, there's a bug. Which is cool. You found a bug. But the other is the UI has changed. If the UI has changed, then that's not a bug. We should accept that image as the new baseline image. We should accept that image as a new baseline image. Lots of tools have reporting of differences. You can see the pink differences. They do that as files on the screen or as galleries. I'd like to show you a demonstration of how this works in Applitools eyes. These are a set of tests. I'll look at, if you remember the Google Gmail tests, this is an example. We can see that in this test, the user took four screenshots. I'll look in one. Actually, let's go back. And we can see that there are no bugs here. But let's continue to the other one. You can see immediately the Applitools has spotted the difference and shows it as an obvious one. The user can now click on this is a new baseline and accept that as a new baseline, or reject it as a bug. And in this case, the test will be caught as a bug. So this is how reporting and changing the baseline images works. So we talked about updating the baseline. Note that updating the baseline isn't as simple as that, because a lot of times we have lots of versions with different UIs and branches with different UIs, and you would like to merge those, do comparisons across the branches. So your tool should probably support things like branches and merges. I'd like to show another aspect of this. Let's go to another demonstration. Here we found a lot of tests failing in the GTAC conference site. You can see we have 28 screenshots. Going over them one by one would be very difficult. So a lot of those, some tools can, when you can group similar changes together, so that the tester can, if we'll wait for a few seconds, okay, can group similar changes. If we look at this change, and we'll zoom into the change, we'll notice that the only thing that's changed, and we can zoom in, the only thing that's changed that the Google Plus has been turned into a Google Minus. So this is either a bug or a feature, and we can change, accept the baseline or not. This page is totally different from the others, so it was not grouped with the others. Let's go back. So, types of testing. We have different kinds of testing. All of the tests have visual aspects to them, and visual testing is, for me, the best way to, one, enhance writing them, enhance the way you code those expectations, and two, enhance the visual quality of your product by testing the visual aspect of your product. Thank you very much. I think it's time for questions.
Yeah, we definitely have some, quite a lot. We won't get to all of them, but let's start. So the first one is actually for Diego. Diego, are you with us?
Yes, of course.
Perfect. Okay, so the first question is about your slide with the pit stop.
Yes.
And here goes. Pit stop is a good analogy, but to get down to 2+ seconds, they had to spend a lot of money in realizing the need for upfront costs for the long-term gain. How do you handle bringing up this part of the conversation with customers?
Yeah, so I guess you know, so the reason that you're talking about the business case, I guess, for shifting quality left and not just for doing automation. So I guess if you're going through a transformation and you're trying to achieve the agility that Gil was talking about, so Agile plus DevOps, testing is right in the middle. What's going to happen is that you're going to need to improve your release frequency. So the business case is going to be made of the need for increasing releases, which means deploying value to your business faster. It means improving customer experience. So you're going to have to set up, a business case by proving or requiring that what the reason why you're trying to introduce this is to basically help them achieve better agility and deliver better software faster, right? It's not because we just like to shift quality to the left. It's a necessary evil, let's say, if you want to deliver software faster. And so you need to kind of put those metrics out, those goals out, which is improving customer experience. You can leverage the data I showed, you know, on customer experience index improvement. To do that, you need to improve quality, and that's the way you do it. It's I would say it depends on the context where you have to start from, but usually you must be in some sort of transformation, and this comes as a big requirement.
So I think we have a follow-up question on that, and I think both I think Diego and Gil maybe can answer it, but you can decide. How do you see the change in the role of the testers in terms of investment in tools, in people, bigger departments, better communications between dev and test? Where do you see the industry going in that sense?
Well, I'll give it a quick answer, and then, because this is actually, there's a lot to it, but yes, the answer would be change to all that. So test centers are becoming more federated, so no more large testing centers. We're seeing that happen. Testers are moving into development teams. To move in development teams, their skills are changing. They are becoming more developer knowledgeable and oriented, rather than you know, staying away from code, trying to understand code and becoming more technical. They're becoming more, as they call them, they look at skills, you know, stack developers type skills. You still have some specialized testers in the test center, but that's for maybe end-to-end performance testing. But everything happening in the team, you know, inside the team, changes the way we use testing. People are using more test-driven development tools. They're using cucumbers of the world. They're using behavior-driven development. They are, you know, they're automating more, therefore doing more code. So skills change, organization change. The type of services that are provided by third parties are different. You don't want manual, you know, an army of manual testers anymore. You want more developer-led. So it's a great question, and a lot of change really happening. You are right.
If I can try and answer both questions, I think they're somewhat related. Treat your DevOps pipeline, especially from our perspective, the testing part of the pipeline, as a development project. So do it in an agile way. Don't try to do everything at once. Do step-by-step, small increments of change that will, after 2 years, 1 year, 2 year, become the real thing. I'm sure that at the pit stop they didn't reach from 10 seconds to 2 seconds in one go. They did it in small incremental changes. And I think that's one of the roles that the tester has today, to drive that change, in the development, to make it more test oriented, and to have testing in all that pipeline be automated.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Sorry, Diego, go ahead.
No, I said it's exactly spot on. Yeah, it's big bang changes. We see less of them. We do see them, though. There are some companies, the ING.coms, who suddenly turned all their organization into 150 dev test teams. PayPal, 650 dev test teams. Big organization, but they've been doing some of this in getting there. But most of the companies, they really look at a value stream and focus on a value stream, make the change in that value stream. Testing, development, ops is involved as well, and then learn from that and repeat it and replicate it. But even to do that, you're going to need to do a little bit of a business test, business case. But it's a small, it's something focusing on very clear objectives that you should set, and measure them and prove them.
That's great. I think that we have, we'll take just one last question. We have a great one, so just one last one. I know that we're running a bit late. So looking into the future, where do you see actually the role of the tester versus the role of the software developer? Are they going to merge into one? Are they going to still be two separate functions because of all the shift left that we see that developers are testing more and more and testers are developing more and more? Is there going to be a merge, or are they going to be separate?
Gil, I can spend for hours on this, but anyway, the answer is no. There will not be just one type of tester. There's still going to be different personas. The data that I see in Agile teams is that you have 1 to 2 testers in a team of 8 to 10 people, and what's happening is that developers are going to be doing more testing. Testers are going to be closer to the developers to collaborate, and therefore you're going to get more of these dev testers for the automation aspects, but you're still going to have subject matter experts on testing, and in some projects, not everybody's going to move to Agile. There's packaged application development. You're still going to have a lot of those, testers that are more business or scriptless, looking for more scriptless. It's a mixed world. I wouldn't say it's going all into one direction only.
+1 on what Diego said.
Okay, so we are out of time, unfortunately. I want to thank everyone who took the time and joined us for this live session, and of course I want to thank Diego and Gil for doing this really wonderful and in-depth session. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you all at our next event.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to mention one more thing. I saw all the questions that were piling up here, and we will try to address all of them via email. So thank you for sending them, and they won't go unanswered. Thank you again. Thank you.